In 1901, a man quietly stepped forward to receive the very first Nobel Prize. His discovery revealed something the human eye had never seen before: the bones beneath our skin glowing in shadow. This was the beginning of a tradition that would honor discovery, literature, and peace for generations. Welcome, dear friend. I'm so glad you're here. This is your quiet place to rest, to feel safe, and to drift gently into sleep. If you'd like to return for more nights like this, I invite you to subscribe and be part of this little circle of calm we're creating together. In the comments, share when you're heading to bed and where you're listening from tonight. It's comforting to imagine us all scattered across the world, connected through these gentle stories, each settling into dreams in our own cozy spaces. So get comfortable, take a slow breath, and let yourself feel at home here. Tonight we'll travel back to that very first Nobel Prize ceremony to meet the laureates whose work changed the world. Their stories shine softly like lanterns in history, guiding us peacefully toward sleep. Wilhelm Röntgen and the Invisible Rays. Wilhelm Conrad Röntgen was born in March of 1845 in the small German town of Lennep. His father was a cloth merchant, and his mother came from a family of Dutch descent. His early years were spent in quiet routines, surrounded by family and countryside, where curiosity grew in silence and long walks shaped his thoughtful nature. As a child, Wilhelm preferred building simple contraptions and exploring outdoors to loud games with others. He had a patient way about him, watching carefully, asking questions few others thought to ask. Teachers sometimes misunderstood his quiet demeanor, but he was already learning the value of observation and persistence. When Wilhelm was a teenager, his family moved to the Netherlands, where he attended school in Utrecht. It was there that he faced one of his greatest early challenges. Wrongly accused of sketching an unflattering caricature of a teacher, he was expelled, an injustice that threatened to block his future education. Despite this setback, Wilhelm refused to abandon learning. He sought technical schools that would accept him, and through determination, he entered Zurich Polytechnic, a respected university. His resilience showed a strength that would guide him throughout his career. He would later recall these struggles as shaping his character and resolve. At Zurich, Wilhelm studied mechanical engineering and physics, drawn deeply to the mysteries of energy and light. He loved the precision of machines and the elegance of natural laws. He spent long hours in laboratories, fascinated by the hidden forces that seemed to lie beneath the surface of ordinary experience. He graduated with distinction, and his professors saw in him not only intelligence but also patience and humility. These qualities made him a gifted experimenter. He accepted teaching positions, moving across universities in Europe, slowly building a reputation for thorough, careful research rather than bold claims or dramatic discoveries. By the 1890s, Wilhelm had become a respected professor of physics at Würzburg in Germany. His laboratory was simple, filled with glass tubes, wires, and chemical screens. Here, away from fanfare, he carried out the work that would change medicine forever, guided not by ambition, but by quiet curiosity. In late 1895, Wilhelm was studying cathode rays. These were streams of particles created inside sealed glass tubes, glowing when electricity passed through them. Scientists across Europe were fascinated by these mysterious rays, but no one suspected that they might reveal something entirely new about the hidden world. One evening, Wilhelm noticed something unusual. A screen coated with chemicals glowed faintly across the room, even though the tube producing the rays was completely covered. Somehow, invisible energy was escaping the glass and traveling through space, striking the screen with a soft shimmer of light. Intrigued, he began experimenting. He placed objects between the tube and the glowing screen. Books, wood, and even metal created shadows. Yet the energy still passed through. It was as though nature had revealed a hidden kind of light, invisible to the eye, yet powerful enough to move through barriers. As Wilhelm continued his tests, he wondered if the strange rays could pass through living tissue. He held his hand in front of the screen. To his astonishment, the faint outlines of his bones appeared, shadowy and ghost-like. It was as though his skin had become transparent, revealing the delicate structure beneath. The sight both amazed and unsettled him. To confirm what he saw, he asked his wife Anna to place her hand before a photographic plate exposed to the rays. When the plate was developed, the image showed her slender bones and wedding ring, stark and clear, glowing against a dark background. Anna reportedly shuddered at the picture, whispering that she had seen her own death. The image carried a haunting quality, both wondrous and eerie. Yet Wilhelm knew he had uncovered something extraordinary. He worked tirelessly for weeks, repeating experiments, taking photographs, and recording his results with meticulous care. In December of 1895, Röntgen published his findings in a paper titled On a New Kind of Rays. He called them X-rays, using the letter X to signify the unknown. His colleagues were stunned. The idea that invisible rays could reveal the inside of the body seemed almost magical. Within weeks, his discovery spread across Europe. Newspapers printed X-ray images of hands and objects hidden in boxes. The public marveled, crowds gathering to see demonstrations. Doctors were astonished, realizing they could now peer beneath the skin without surgery, identifying broken bones and lodged bullets with unprecedented ease. To understand what he found, imagine light as waves. Some waves are gentle and visible, forming the colors of a sunset. Others, like X-rays, are powerful and invisible. They slip through flesh and muscle, slowed only by denser materials like bone or metal, which cast distinct shadows upon plates or screens. X-rays carried far more energy than ordinary light. This energy allowed them to reveal hidden layers, creating images of contrast. Soft tissues appeared faint, while bones and metal stood out bold and bright. It was as if nature had given humanity a new sense, a vision into the unseen. Röntgen's experiments showed that the rays traveled in straight lines and could not be reflected like mirrors reflected light. They left behind patterns on photographic plates, etching the unseen world into shadowy pictures. It was both science and poetry, a hidden truth painted softly by invisible waves. The discovery reshaped medicine almost overnight. Surgeons no longer had to cut blindly to find broken bones or bullets. Diagnoses became faster and safer. Hospitals scrambled to acquire X-ray machines, and within months, radiology became a new branch of healing. Countless lives were eased by the gift of this hidden light. Yet Röntgen remained humble. He refused to patent his discovery, insisting it belonged to all humanity. He declined to profit from the machines built in his name. Instead, he continued to teach and experiment quietly, content to let others benefit. His gift was knowledge, freely shared with the world. The public greeted X-rays with fascination. Amusement halls and exhibitions invited people to view their own skeleton hands. Newspapers filled with strange images of bones and rings. For many, it felt like stepping into a realm of ghosts, as if science had stolen secrets from the shadows. Some were fearful. They wondered if X-rays might peer into private letters or reveal thoughts themselves. Cartoons joked about scientists seeing through clothing, but these anxieties could not dim the sense of wonder. The discovery had changed what people believed was possible, opening imaginations to new horizons. Doctors quickly became skilled at using the rays. Children with fractured arms were spared painful procedures. Soldiers with hidden bullets had their wounds located with precision. The technique spread with breathtaking speed, proving indispensable in hospitals across Europe and beyond. Healing had entered a new era, yet the new technology carried risks unknown at first. Doctors and patients sometimes exposed themselves too long, resulting in burns or sores. Some scientists, fascinated by the power of X-rays, experimented without caution and suffered injuries. Over time, safety methods emerged, shielding users from harmful doses. Even with dangers, the benefits were overwhelming. Radiology became a field of its own, with physicians trained to read the ghostly shadows of bones and organs. X-rays turned the body into a map, each image a quiet guide to healing. Röntgen's discovery was both practical and transformative. Despite fame, Wilhelm remained reserved. He continued to teach, shunning public displays. When some suggested naming the rays after him, he declined. In many countries, they are still called Röntgen rays, yet he preferred the simple name X-rays, keeping the mystery of the unknown alive. In 1901, Alfred Nobel's will was fulfilled, and the first Nobel Prizes were awarded. Committees debated many candidates, but in physics, the choice was clear. Wilhelm Röntgen's discovery had already transformed medicine and science, bringing hope and healing to countless lives. At the ceremony in Stockholm, the hall glittered with chandeliers. Scholars, dignitaries, and the Swedish royal family gathered to honor human achievement. Röntgen stepped forward quietly, bowing as he accepted the very first Nobel Prize in Physics. History had chosen him to open a new tradition. He gave no speech that day, preferring silence over display. His modesty spoke for him, as did his decision to donate the prize money to his university. Knowledge, he believed, should serve others, not enrich the individual. His humility was as striking as his discovery. For the Nobel Committee, Röntgen set the standard. The first laureate embodied what Alfred Nobel intended, a discovery of immense practical value, freely shared with the world and carried with quiet conscience. The prize was not just for physics, it was for the spirit of science itself. As the Nobel Prize gave him recognition, Röntgen remained unchanged in spirit. Fame did not draw him into grand speeches or politics. He still preferred the quiet of his laboratory and the presence of students eager to learn. For Wilhelm, science was a calling, not a stage. The ripple of his discovery spread far beyond hospitals. Scientists used X-rays to study crystals, revealing their hidden structures. Metals and minerals surrendered their secrets to the invisible rays. Entire industries found uses, from testing materials to guiding new inventions. Archaeologists applied X-rays to treasures of the past. Mummies were examined without disturbing their wrappings. Ancient relics were studied without harm. For the first time, history itself could be seen beneath layers of time, a gift of vision reaching far into the ages. In everyday life, X-rays became common. Jewelers tested gems, customs officers inspected luggage, and engineers searched for flaws in machines. The rays became tools of trust, confirming what eyes could not. The unseen world had become part of ordinary routine. Yet even as X-rays became widespread, Röntgen kept a simple life. He dressed modestly, avoided public attention, and declined honors beyond what he felt necessary. To him, the work itself was reward enough. He sought neither wealth nor glory, only truth revealed through experiment. In his personal life, he remained devoted to his wife Anna. She had witnessed the first image of X-rays, her own hand captured in ghostly outline. Together, they cherished quiet evenings away from the noise of acclaim, living with calm dignity in Wurzburg. Röntgen's choice to refuse patents ensured rapid spread of the discovery. Hospitals in small towns, far from great cities, soon acquired machines. Families who might otherwise suffer in silence now had hope. It was an act of generosity that multiplied endlessly across the world. As decades passed, radiology grew into a full medical discipline. Doctors trained to interpret the shadows, learning to read fracture scopes and internal conditions. The black and white images became as familiar as any chart, guiding countless treatments. Each patient touched by them echoed Röntgen's gift. Even as his health declined in later years, Wilhelm continued to work with patients. He avoided public ceremonies, letting younger scientists take the spotlight. His humility remained unbroken, his devotion to discovery undimmed. He carried himself as he always had, quiet, thoughtful, steady. Röntgen passed away in 1923 at the age of 77. He left no children and little wealth, having given much to his university. But his true inheritance to the world was greater than fortune. It was a way of seeing a hidden light turned into a tool for healing. Röntgen's legacy was larger than any medal. By revealing the unseen, he gave humanity a new sense, a new way of understanding the body and the world. Each X-ray taken, each life healed, carried a quiet whisper of his discovery, echoing far beyond his lifetime. The Nobel Committee had chosen wisely. By selecting Röntgen as the first laureate, they set a precedent. The Nobel Prizes would honor discoveries that improved life, not just in theory, but in practice. His work embodied the spirit of science serving humanity. For Alfred Nobel's vision, Röntgen became the perfect beginning. The invention of dynamite had brought Nobel both fortune and regret. Röntgen's rays, by contrast, were almost purely healing. His humility, his gift to medicine, and his refusal to profit showed what a Nobel laureate could be. In time, generations of laureates would follow, each honored for discoveries in physics, chemistry, medicine, literature, and peace. Yet it was Röntgen who stood first in line, his soft-spoken presence marking the start of a tradition that still continues more than a century later. Today, X-rays remain as vital as ever. From hospitals to airports, from research labs to archaeological digs, the rays continue to serve. The technology has grown safer, sharper, and faster. Yet the essence is the same as when Wilhelm first saw his wife's hand appear like a spectral shadow. For patients, an X-ray often brings reassurance, an answer, a guide to healing. Broken bones are set, hidden ailments are found, and countless diagnoses become clear. Each glowing image is part of Röntgen's gift, still unfolding, still serving the needs of humanity. Though he lived humbly, Röntgen's influence was vast. He showed that discovery need not be claimed for wealth or power. Instead, it could be offered freely, multiplying its impact across borders and generations. His choice gave his work a purity that shines even brighter today. Close your eyes and imagine his quiet laboratory once more. A dim room, a glass tube humming softly, and a screen glowing faintly in the dark. In that silence, the invisible became visible, and the world shifted. It was a moment of both wonder and gentle transformation. The story of Wilhelm Röntgen reminds us that progress can be born from patience, humility, and curiosity. His rays of light were not loud or fiery, but steady and clear. They carried no destruction, only knowledge, healing, and hope. His gift was as calm as his nature. And so we leave him here, the first Nobel laureate, the quiet discoverer of invisible light. His story is a lantern in history, glowing softly. Each time an X-ray shines today, we see not only bones and shadows, but also the legacy of a man who revealed the unseen with grace. Jacobus van 't Hoff and the Dance of Molecules. Jacobus Henricus van 't Hoff was born in 1852 in Rotterdam, a bustling Dutch port city alive with ships and trade. From a young age, he displayed a vivid imagination. He loved not only numbers and puzzles, but also poetry and travel stories. His mind wandered between art and science with ease. As a boy, Jacobus often stared at the harbor, watching sails catch the wind and ships curve toward the horizon. He dreamed of discovery, though at first his teachers found him restless. He struggled in rigid classrooms, but excelled when allowed to explore problems freely, guided by his curiosity. He studied chemistry in Delft, later moving to Leiden and Bonn, where he studied under August Keckel, one of Europe's leading chemists. Keckel had proposed bold ideas about how atoms connected. These lessons would shape van 't Hoff, encouraging him to think beyond the flat diagrams of his time. At Utrecht and later in Paris, van 't Hoff absorbed the latest scientific debates. Chemists still pictured molecules as flat, two-dimensional structures. Yet Jacobus wondered if atoms arranged themselves in space like stars or crystals. He began to imagine molecules in 3 dimensions, turning and twisting in invisible patterns. In 1874, van 't Hoff published a small pamphlet, only a dozen pages, proposing a radical idea. He suggested that carbon atoms bonded in a tetrahedral shape, creating 3-dimensional molecules. At a time when most chemists thought only in flat diagrams, his idea seemed daring, almost poetic. Many rejected the concept at first. Some mocked van 't Hoff, calling his ideas fantasy. Yet others saw promise. The tetrahedral model explained why some molecules could exist as mirror images, with different properties despite identical formulas. It was a key to understanding the geometry of chemistry. This idea became the foundation of stereochemistry, the study of how molecules are arranged in space. With it, chemists could explain puzzling differences in behavior, why some compounds rotated light differently, or why 2 substances with the same elements behaved in unique ways. Van 't Hoff's imagination had opened a new world. No longer were molecules flat diagrams on paper, they were living forms in 3 dimensions, like tiny sculptures turning and dancing in space. This new vision guided research for generations, reshaping organic chemistry forever. Beyond geometry, Van 't Hoff explored how substances behaved in solutions. He studied osmosis, the movement of water across membranes, a process vital to plants and living cells. By applying mathematics to chemistry, he linked physical laws to life itself, bridging fields once thought separate. His work on osmotic pressure revealed that dissolved particles behaved much like gases, obeying similar laws. This insight helped explain biological processes, such as how plants draw water through roots and how cells balance their internal fluids. Chemistry was no longer just reactions in flasks, but the science of life's flow. Van 't Hoff had a gift for connecting the abstract with the practical. His work on chemical dynamics explained how reactions moved forward over time, why some occurred quickly while others crept slowly. By studying rates of change, he revealed hidden rhythms in chemistry, like music written in numbers. His theories showed that temperature and concentration shaped the speed of reactions. This helped chemists understand combustion, fermentation, and countless industrial processes. The equations he developed became tools for both scientists and engineers, bridging laboratories and factories in a shared language of reaction rates. Despite the brilliance of his ideas, recognition came slowly. For years he worked in relative obscurity, publishing quietly and teaching. Yet his ideas spread gradually as younger chemists adopted his models. Over time, even those who mocked his tetrahedral vision admitted its clarity and usefulness. In 1878, Van 't Hoff accepted a position at the veterinary school in Utrecht, teaching physics, chemistry, and mathematics. Though modest, the job gave him freedom to pursue research. Surrounded by students, he refined his theories, showing how they applied not just to chemistry, but to biology and medicine. By 1878, he also published his great work on chemical dynamics, laying out laws of equilibrium and rates of reaction. His equations explained why some processes reached balance, with reactants and products held in steady proportion, while others rushed toward completion. This work earned him wider notice. In 1877, he had been appointed professor of chemistry, mineralogy, and geology at the University of Amsterdam. Here he built a laboratory and mentored students, becoming a leader of Dutch science. His reputation grew steadily, carried by his originality and clarity of thought. By the late 1880s, Van 't Hoff's contributions were recognized internationally. His theory of osmotic pressure was praised for uniting chemistry and physics. His laws of dynamics guided industrial chemistry, improving yields and efficiency. His tetrahedral model became the accepted language of molecular structure. In 1896, he accepted a chair at the University of Berlin, one of Europe's most prestigious scientific institutions. There, he joined leading chemists in shaping the direction of modern research. His lectures were known for their clarity, blending mathematical precision with imaginative vision. Van 't Hoff was not only a scientist, but also a poet at heart. He often spoke of chemistry in lyrical terms, seeing molecules as dancers and reactions as symphonies of nature. This poetic touch set him apart, making his work both rigorous and inspiring to those who heard him. By the turn of the century, his impact was undeniable. His ideas had reshaped entire fields, guided industry, and deepened understanding of life itself. When Alfred Nobel's will created a prize to honor scientific achievement, Van T. Hoff was a natural choice. His selection as the first chemistry laureate was clear. In December of 1901, Van T. Hoff traveled to Stockholm to receive the very first Nobel Prize in chemistry. The ceremony was filled with scholars, dignitaries, and musicians. Chandeliers glowed above as laureates stepped forward, each representing Alfred Nobel's dream of honoring those who served humanity. When Van T. Hoff's name was called, he walked with quiet dignity. He accepted the gold medal and diploma, bowing before the Swedish king. For him, the honor was not about personal pride, but about recognition for the science he loved, the molecules whose hidden dances he had revealed. The committee praised his contributions to chemical dynamics and osmotic pressure, as well as his bold vision of three-dimensional molecules. His theories, they said, had provided tools for both understanding and applying chemistry, linking abstract principles to practical outcomes across many fields. Van T. Hoff's acceptance was characteristically humble. He never sought fame. What pleased him most was that chemistry itself was honored, that the invisible patterns of molecules had been given a place of dignity before the world. It was a moment when science and imagination met under the glow of history. Outside the ceremony, his ideas were already transforming society. Indices used his equations to design chemical plants with greater efficiency. Pharmacists used his principles to improve medicines. Farmers benefited from better fertilizers, shaped by the understanding of chemical equilibria. His reach touched every corner of daily life. In the sciences, his work opened doors to physical chemistry as a field of its own. Researchers built upon his foundation to explore thermodynamics, kinetics, and solution theory. Laboratories around the world carried forward his equations, applying them to both grand discoveries and small, practical tasks. Students admired his ability to make chemistry alive. He spoke of molecules not as symbols on paper, but as real forms moving in space, bending and turning with elegance. His lectures left lasting impressions, inspiring many to see chemistry as a living, breathing subject filled with beauty. At home, Van T. Hoff lived simply. He enjoyed literature and nature, often blending his scientific thoughts with reflections drawn from poetry. He never lost the imagination of his youth, when ships in Rotterdam's harbour had sparked dreams of exploration. To him, science was just another voyage into the unknown. As the first Nobel Chemistry Laureate, Van T. Hoff set a high standard. His discoveries were not only theoretical but also practical, helping society directly. He showed that chemistry was a universal language, linking life, industry, and imagination. This example guided the prizes for decades to come. The Nobel medal he received was more than gold. It symbolized a turning point, a recognition that the dance of molecules was as worthy of honor as literature or peace. For Van T. Hoff, it was a lantern of encouragement, shining on the path of future scientists who would follow his lead. After the Nobel ceremony, Van T. Hoff returned to Berlin. He continued his lectures and research with quiet dedication. Honors flowed his way, yet he remained modest, preferring the company of students and colleagues. His joy was not in awards, but in the pursuit of knowledge itself. His work deepened the foundations of solution chemistry. He studied how salts dissolved, how crystals formed, and how temperature influenced stability. These studies enriched industries from mining to medicine, showing once again that his theories bridged the gap between the abstract and the practical. Despite his growing fame, Van 't Hoff remained a man of balance. He wrote poetry in his spare time, blending science with art. His imagination never dimmed. He described molecules as dancers, spinning and twirling in patterns too small for the eye, yet shaping the world in silence. As the new century dawned, chemistry itself was changing. Laboratories buzzed with discoveries in radioactivity and atomic theory. Van 't Hoff watched with interest, proud that his work had helped open the path toward a deeper understanding of matter's structure. He had shown that imagination could lead the way. Though his mind remained sharp, his health began to falter. By 1905, he was diagnosed with tuberculosis, a disease that shadowed many families of that time. His energy waned, and he withdrew from public life, focusing on rest or continuing small projects when strength allowed. He spent his last years in a quiet home near Berlin, surrounded by family and books. Friends recalled his gentle humor, his kindness, and his love for both science and beauty. Though illness slowed him, he remained a thinker until the end, still curious, still reflective. In 1911, Jacobus van 't Hoff passed away at the age of 58. His death was mourned by scientists across Europe, who recognized him as one of the great minds of chemistry. Though his life was shorter than many, his influence reached far into the future. His tetrahedral model became a cornerstone of organic chemistry. His equations of chemical dynamics remain in textbooks taught to students around the world. His vision of molecules as three-dimensional beings is now so natural that it is hard to imagine a time when it was not accepted. The Nobel Prize he received marked more than personal achievement. It symbolized the recognition of chemistry as a central force in human progress. His life embodied the union of imagination and rigor, showing that science can be both precise and poetic, useful and beautiful. For students today, Van 't Hoff's story is a reminder that bold ideas may first be doubted, yet time reveals their worth. His willingness to think differently, to picture molecules in new ways, reshaped science. His legacy remains a quiet dance of molecules, endlessly unfolding in the rhythms of life. Van 't Hoff's vision carried far beyond his lifetime. Chemists who followed built upon his models to create new medicines, stronger materials, and deeper insights into biology. His imagination had opened doors that others would walk through, carrying science into realms he could only glimpse. His Nobel Prize set a precedent for chemistry. The committee had honored not only discovery, but also creativity, courage, and usefulness. By awarding Van 't Hoff, they signaled that bold ideas, once mocked, could reshape the world and deserve recognition at the highest level. Students still learn his name in classrooms. The tetrahedral carbon is drawn on countless blackboards, the equations of chemical dynamics solved in exercises. Each time a student sees molecules as three-dimensional, they are unknowingly tracing the path he first drew in that slim pamphlet of 1874. Industry continues to benefit from his insights. Fertilizers, fuels, and pharmaceuticals are developed with the help of his equations. Farmers feed nations, doctors heal patients, and engineers design safer systems, all aided by principles Van 't Hoff revealed with pencil and imagination. His story also reminds us of humility. Though praised in his later years, he never sought fame. He carried himself as a servant of knowledge, not a master of it. For Van 't Hoff, science was a voyage, and he was only one sailor charting part of its endless sea. In the halls of the Nobel Foundation, his name remains among the first. His medal rests in history, a symbol of the prize's beginning. The golden circle of Alfred Nobel's profile, placed in Van 't Hoff's hand, was the first to affirm chemistry as a force for human good. Imagine him in Stockholm once more, bowing quietly as applause filled the hall. He was not a man of great speeches, but of ideas. The light of the chandeliers reflected in his medal, while the light of imagination reflected in his work. Both continue to shine today. The molecules he envisioned still dance unseen, shaping the taste of food, the beating of hearts, and the growth of plants. His gift was not only knowledge, but also perspective, showing that life's smallest parts can hold the grandest truths. As you rest tonight, think of the boy by the Rotterdam harbor, dreaming of ships and horizons. That restless imagination became the force that changed chemistry forever. His vision of molecules turning gently in space is now part of how we understand the fabric of life. And so we leave Jacobus Van 't Hoff here, the first Nobel laureate in chemistry, a man who saw deeper than diagrams, who gave shape to the invisible. His story is a quiet dance in history, a reminder that imagination, patience, and courage can transform the unseen into light. Emil von Behring and the Healing Breath. Emil Adolf von Behring was born in 1854 in a small village in East Prussia, now part of Poland. He was the son of a schoolteacher, and though his family had little wealth, they valued learning. From his earliest days, Emil showed determination to rise through knowledge and service. His path to medicine was not straightforward. Without money for university, he accepted a place at a military medical school in Berlin. In return for his studies, he owed years of service as an army doctor. This arrangement gave him discipline, structure, and the tools to build his career. As a young physician, Emil was deeply concerned with infectious disease. In the 19th century, epidemics swept across towns and villages. Diphtheria was one of the most feared. It struck children most often, coating their throats with a deadly membrane that slowly suffocated them, robbing families of hope. At the time, treatments were crude and often ineffective. Doctors tried surgery, cauterization, or herbal remedies, but few survived. Parents could only watch helplessly as children gasped for air. Hospitals were filled with sorrow. Emil longed to change this, to give families a chance against the disease. His scientific career advanced when he began research in Berlin's Institute for Infectious Diseases under the guidance of Robert Koch, one of the great pioneers of microbiology. There he studied how the body fought illness, searching for ways to strengthen natural defenses against invisible invaders. With a colleague, Shibasaburo Kitasato from Japan, Emil investigated serum therapy. They found that animals infected with tetanus or diphtheria could be treated with the blood serum of animals already exposed. The serum carried protective substances that neutralized the toxins of the disease. This discovery was groundbreaking. It showed that immunity could be transferred, that something within the blood carried the power to fight infection. Today we know them as antibodies. At the time, it was revolutionary. offering hope against illnesses that had plagued humanity for centuries. In 1891, Emil successfully treated children suffering from diphtheria with serum therapy. For the first time, survival rates rose dramatically. What had once been nearly certain death was now met with recovery. Parents wept with relief, doctors felt hope, and Emil's name spread across Europe. The public hailed him as a savior of children. Newspapers called him the savior of little ones. Hospitals adopted serum therapy, and diphtheria wards transformed from places of despair to halls of healing. A disease that once stole thousands of lives each year was now being pushed back. To understand what he achieved, imagine diphtheria as a poison spreading through the body. The serum carried defenders that locked onto the toxin, neutralizing its power. It was not a cure in the modern sense, but it gave the body time to heal. For families, it meant breath restored and life renewed. The impact of serum therapy was immediate and profound. Hospitals that once lost nearly all children to diphtheria now saw survival rates soar. Doctors embraced the treatment, and governments supported its distribution. What had been a hopeless illness was now one of medicine's first great victories. In Berlin, Emil's laboratory grew busier. Researchers from across Europe came to learn the new therapy. Families traveled long distances seeking treatment for their children. Word of his success spread quickly, and his work became a symbol of science's power to protect the most vulnerable. Governments recognized the importance of his discovery. Factories were established to produce serum in large quantities, making it accessible to hospitals in cities and towns. For the first time, a therapy born in the laboratory reached across borders, saving lives on a global scale. In 1894, Emil became a professor at Marburg University, where he established his own institute. Here he continued to refine serum therapies, training students and advancing research. Marburg became a center for immunology, carrying his influence far into the next generation of scientists. Colleagues described him as serious, hard-working, and sometimes stern. His military training had given him discipline, and his drive for success made him demanding. Yet beneath his strictness lay compassion, especially for the children whose lives his therapies saved. His work carried deep personal meaning. Serum therapy also helped shape the new field of immunology, the study of how the body defends itself. Emil's findings showed that disease was not only an enemy to be fought, but also a puzzle to be understood. The immune system became a subject of science, no longer a mystery. While celebrated, his success brought challenges. Others competed fiercely, claiming credit or challenging results. The scientific world was full of rivalries, and Emil sometimes clashed with colleagues. Yet his discovery stood firm. The results in hospitals were undeniable, written in the lives of children who survived. By the turn of the century, serum therapy had spread around the world. Clinics in Europe, America, and Asia used it to fight diphtheria. Death rates fell dramatically. The therapy was hailed as one of the greatest medical achievements of the 19th century, and Emil's reputation reached its peak. His name became known beyond science. Parents thanked him in letters, governments awarded him honors, and he became a symbol of progress. Though sometimes proud, Emil knew the true measure of his work was in the breathing of children who might otherwise have been lost. In 1901, the Nobel Committee gathered to award the first prizes for medicine. The choice was clear. Emil von Behring's serum therapy had saved countless lives and given humanity a tool against disease. He was named the first Nobel laureate in physiology or medicine, honored as a healer of breath. The Nobel ceremony in December 1901 was held in Stockholm, where laureates gathered to receive the first prizes. Emil von Behring stood among them, representing medicine. When his name was called, he stepped forward with solemn dignity, aware that he carried not only an honor but the gratitude of countless families. He accepted the gold medal and diploma from the hands of the Swedish king. Applause filled the hall as the audience recognized his achievements. It was not only a prize for science, but for every child whose breath had been restored, every family spared the grief of loss. The Nobel Committee praised him for creating serum therapy, the first truly effective treatment against a deadly infectious disease. They noted that his work had changed the face of medicine, offering a model for future therapies. The prize honored both his discovery and his practical power to save lives. For Emil, the recognition brought both pride and relief. Years of long experiments, doubts, and struggles had been justified. Yet he also knew that science was not the work of one man alone. He credited his collaborators, his students, and the countless patients who had taken part in trials. After the ceremony, Emil's fame grew even greater. Invitations poured in from universities and governments. His institute in Marburg became a center for vaccine and serum development, advancing not only diphtheria research but also treatments for other infectious diseases. Society hailed him as a hero. Newspapers described him as a conqueror of disease, a man who had turned the tide against one of the most feared illnesses of the century. In cities across Europe, families spoke his name with gratitude, knowing that without his work their children might not have survived. Industry, too, was transformed. The mass production of serum showed how science, medicine, and industry could cooperate. Laboratories grew into factories, distributing vials of life-saving fluid. It was one of the first times medical science had been scaled to reach millions of people. His Nobel Prize symbolized more than personal success. It marked a new era in medicine where scientific discovery could translate directly into healing. No longer were doctors limited to guesswork and tradition. Now, therapies born in laboratories brought real, measurable change. In the history of the Nobel Prizes, Emo's award demonstrated what the Medicine Prize could mean. It would honor discoveries that touched everyday lives, that reduced suffering and prolonged hope. His example set the tone for generations of laureates who would follow in his path. As Emil returned to Germany, he carried the weight of recognition. Yet he also carried responsibility. The world now looked to him as a leader of medicine, a symbol of science's promise. He continued his work, determined to expand the reach of serum therapy and explore new cures for disease. Back in Marburg, Emil expanded his institute. Researchers worked day and night producing serum, testing new treatments, and training young physicians. His laboratory became a beacon of modern medicine, showing how science could be both experimental and practical, reaching patients far beyond its walls. Serum therapy's success laid the foundation for immunology, a new science of defense. For the first time, researchers began to see the immune system not as mystery, but as a set of processes. Emil's work showed that immunity could be transferred, studied, and strengthened. It was the dawn of a new discipline. Other scientists built upon his work, searching for vaccines and studying antibodies in detail. The discoveries that followed, from antitoxins to vaccines, were rooted in the principles Emil had revealed. His efforts gave medicine a roadmap, guiding it into a new century of healing. Though his career flourished, Emil faced criticism. Some accused him of taking too much credit for discoveries made with collaborators. Others questioned his methods or his stern manner. He was a complex figure, admired for his achievements, yet sometimes difficult in character. Despite disputes, his reputation as a healer endured. The children who lived because of serum therapy spoke louder than rivals. Parents who once watched their children fade now watched them recover. That truth was stronger than argument, written into lives that would continue for generations. Emil was awarded titles and honors, including knighthood, becoming von Behring. He received recognition from governments and universities, yet he remained most proud of his practical achievement, the fact that his work had turned despair into survival, transforming medicine's relationship with disease. In his personal life, Emil found companionship in his marriage to Spinola, the daughter of a wealthy family. Together they raised children, giving him a family life that balanced his demanding work. His home offered warmth, even as his career carried heavy responsibilities. Despite fame, Emil often felt the strain of expectation. The burden of leading medicine into a new era was immense. He carried the weight of being the first Nobel laureate in medicine, a symbol of science's promise. At times, this responsibility left him weary and withdrawn. Yet his devotion to research never wavered. Even when challenged, he returned to the laboratory, adjusting experiments, seeking new answers. His persistence reflected the same determination that had carried him from a poor village in Prussia to the world stage of Stockholm. As years passed, Emil's influence spread across the globe. His serum therapy inspired research into vaccines for tuberculosis, tetanus, and more. His institute remained a hub of progress, guiding students who would continue his mission. His work had lit a torch, and others carried it forward. In his later years, Emil's health began to decline. The long hours of work, the stress of leadership, and the toll of expectations weighed heavily on him. Yet he continued to guide his institute, determined to leave it strong for the students and researchers who would follow. Tuberculosis, the disease that haunted so many in his time, eventually touched him as well. He withdrew from public life, focusing on rest and reflection. Even in illness, he thought of medicine, considering how future generations might conquer the diseases that still lingered. Emil von Behring died in 1917 at the age of 63. The world mourned the passing of the man who had given breath back to thousands of children. His funeral was attended by dignitaries and colleagues, but most of all remembered by the families whose lives his work had changed. The Nobel Foundation remembered him as the first laureate in medicine, the man who showed what the prize could represent. His example set the stage for a century of discoveries, each honored for saving lives, easing suffering, and deepening our understanding of the human body. Serum therapy paved the way for vaccines and modern immunology. Though science advanced beyond his methods, the principle he revealed that the body carried defenders that could be harnessed remains at the heart of medicine today. His work was not the end, but a beginning. Imagine the relief of a parent in 1891 watching a child's breathing ease after days of struggle. That moment of restored hope is Emil's legacy. Each life saved was a silent thank you, a reminder that one discovery can ripple outward to touch countless others. His story reminds us that progress often comes from persistence in the face of despair. What once seemed impossible, curing a deadly childhood disease, became reality through patience, science, and compassion. His life's work was a lantern in the darkness of illness. The Nobel Prize he received carried more than honor. It was a symbol of the healing power of science, the promise that discoveries could change lives not in theory but in practice. His medal reflected not only his achievement, but the breath of every child who survived. As you rest, think of Emil's journey, from a poor village, through hardship, to the heights of medicine. His path was not easy, but it was steady, guided by a desire to help. His work became a gift that continues to echo in every vaccine, every treatment, every act of healing. And so we leave Emil von Behring here, the healer of breath, the first Nobel laureate in medicine. His story is a quiet promise that science can protect, restore, and give hope. In the calm of night, his legacy drifts like a gentle breath, carrying life forward even now. Sully Prudhomme and the poet's voice. René Francois Armand Sully Prudhomme was born in Paris in 1839. He grew up during a time when the city was alive with ideas, art, and debate. From childhood he was drawn to words, yet he also held an interest in science. Once considering studies in engineering before poetry claimed his heart, at school Prudhomme revealed a quiet love for language. He admired Latin verse, the rhythm of lines, and the ability of poetry to capture thought and feeling. Yet life tested him early. His plans to become an engineer were halted by eye troubles, forcing him toward other paths. He turned instead to law, though his heart was not in it. While working as a clerk, he spent evenings with books of verse, writing quietly by candlelight. Friends encouraged him to share his work, and soon his poems began to circulate in small literary circles in Paris. In 1865 he published his first collection, Stances E.T. Poems. The book revealed a poet of reflection, serious and lyrical. His verses spoke of longing, justice, and the fragility of the human soul. The collection was praised, and his name became known among France's growing literary voices. Unlike some poets of his time, Prudhomme avoided flamboyance. His style was sober and thoughtful. He wished not to dazzle but to illuminate, using poetry to probe questions of existence, morality, and truth. His words carried a quiet dignity, appealing to readers who sought meaning more than spectacle. Prudhomme's verse often reflected his struggles with faith and doubt. He balanced reason with feeling, seeking harmony between the sciences he once admired and the inner world of emotion. His poems were bridges, linking logic and lyric, offering comfort to readers searching for stability in a restless world. During the Franco-Prussian War of 1870, Prudhomme served in the National Guard. The conflict left deep marks on him. He wrote of war's sorrow, its cruelty and futility. His later works carried this weight, blending personal grief with the broader sadness of a nation scarred by conflict. As the years passed, Prudhomme became recognized as a leading poet of France. He was elected to the Académie Française in 1881, joining the most distinguished writers of the nation. His election confirmed his place among the guardians of French literature. He continued to write poetry and essays, often exploring philosophy. He sought to unite the clarity of reason with the beauty of verse. His writings were not always popular with younger, more radical poets, but his seriousness earned respect from those who valued depth and reflection. By the dawn of the 20th century, Prudhomme was a respected elder of French letters. His health, however, had begun to fail. Illness weakened him, and he spent long periods in rest. Still, his reputation remained strong, and when the Nobel Committee met in 1901, his name rose quickly to consideration. When the Swedish Academy gathered to choose the first Nobel laureate in literature, many names were suggested. Among them was Leo Tolstoy, whose novels had already left a mark on the world. Yet the Academy sought a writer whose works reflected idealism, morality, and dignity in language. Prudhomme fit their vision. His poetry was measured, serious, and deeply concerned with truth and justice. Though less revolutionary than Tolstoy, his work embodied the Academy's wish to reward literature that uplifted and steadied the soul. It was a conservative choice, but one made with respect. The announcement surprised some. Critics argued that Tolstoy or other great novelists were more deserving. Yet the Academy defended its decision, praising Prudhomme's blending of philosophy and poetry. His voice of calm reflection at a time when society often leaned toward noise and spectacle. In December 1901, Sully Prudhomme was named the first Nobel Prize laureate in literature. His health prevented him from traveling to Stockholm for the ceremony. Instead, he remained in France, receiving news of the award with gratitude and quiet humility consistent with his nature. The Nobel Committee praised him for his poetic composition, which gives evidence of lofty idealism, artistic perfection, and a rare combination of heart and intellect. Their words reflected the spirit of Alfred Nobel's vision, honoring literature that uplifted rather than shocked. Prudhomme, in response, expressed gratitude but also modesty. He never claimed greatness for himself, but hoped that his work had offered comfort, clarity, and beauty. To him, poetry was not for fame but for service, a way to ease the burdens of life and reflect the human soul. In France, reactions were mixed. Admirers celebrated the honor, proud that a French poet had been chosen first. Younger writers, however, criticized the decision, arguing that his work was outdated. Yet even critics admitted that his sincerity and moral strength were admirable qualities. The debate highlighted the challenge of awarding literature. Was the Nobel Prize to honor innovation or tradition? Should it reward daring voices or steady ones? By choosing Prudhomme, the Academy declared that literature must also serve ideals of conscience and harmony. Prudhomme himself seemed untouched by controversy. He continued to live quietly, surrounded by books, friends, and the rhythm of Parisian life. He valued the prize not as a crown but as a recognition that poetry still mattered. That verse could hold a place beside science and peace. For the world, his award marked a beginning. The Nobel Prize in Literature had found its first voice in a poet who sought balance between reason and emotion. His selection set the tone for a century of debate, showing that literature's value is as varied and complex as life itself. As Prudhomme aged, his health grew fragile. He suffered from paralysis of the legs and spent long periods confined indoors. Writing became more difficult, yet he still composed when strength allowed. Even in illness, he clung to the solace of words, turning his suffering into quiet reflection. His poetry often returned to themes of fragility and endurance. He wrote of sorrow, but also of the persistence of the human spirit. His verses suggested that even in pain, one could find dignity. This sincerity resonated with readers who sought comfort in troubled times. Prudhomme valued clarity. He disliked obscurity in verse, believing poetry should speak plainly to the heart while also lifting the mind toward ideals. His language was simple yet graceful, a steady hand guiding readers through the complexities of thought and feeling. The Nobel Prize gave his work renewed attention. Translations appeared in other languages, introducing his reflective voice to audiences beyond France. Readers discovered in his poetry a gentleness, a refusal of excess, and a devotion to truth that carried universal appeal. At the same time, his selection sparked discussion about the role of the Nobel Prize in literature. Was it meant to honor the most famous, the most innovative, or the most morally uplifting? Prudhomme's award became the first step in a tradition filled with both praise and debate. While Tolstoy's omission was lamented, the Academy defended its choice. They argued that Prudhomme's balance of intellect and heart represented the very spirit Alfred Nobel wished to encourage. His poetry may not have been revolutionary, but it was steady, thoughtful, and sincere. In his later years, Prudhomme published essays that blended philosophy and literature. He continued to search for ways to unite reason and faith, logic and feeling. His writing reflected the spirit of a man who never ceased asking questions, even as his body weakened. He became a symbol of quiet persistence. Though overshadowed later by more daring poets, his examples showed that poetry could be serious, reflective, and moral, without losing beauty. The Nobel Prize had lifted him into history, securing his name among literature's honored voices. Prudhomme died in 1907 at the age of 68. France mourned the passing of its first Nobel laureate in literature. He was buried with respect, remembered not only for his words, but for his dedication to ideals that transcended the noise of his age. His Nobel Prize marked the beginning of a tradition that continues today. By choosing him, the Academy declared that literature matters, that words can shape conscience as much as inventions shape the world. His award gave poetry a place among the great forces of progress. In the years after his death, Prudhomme's poetry faded somewhat from popular attention. New voices in France, bold and experimental, took the stage. Yet his Nobel Prize kept his name alive, ensuring that his contribution to literature was remembered in the long story of the prize. For later laureates, his award was a reminder that the Nobel Prize balanced innovation with tradition. Some winners would be controversial, chosen for daring work. Others, like Prudhomme, would be honored for stability and ideals. Together, they reflected the wide reach of literature's power. Prudhomme's writings continue to be studied for their blend of lyricism and philosophy. His verses speak softly of sorrow, justice, and the search for truth. While not as fiery as some contemporaries, his calm voice carries a dignity that still touches readers who seek quiet meaning. His poems often begin in simplicity, describing a scene, a thought, or a feeling, and then unfold into reflection. They carry a meditative quality, well suited to those who read in solitude, seeking comfort in words that are both tender and thoughtful. The Nobel Prize in Literature has since gone to many voices across the globe, from novelists to playwrights, from poets to essayists. Yet the first was given to Prudhomme, a poet who valued harmony between intellect and heart. His example reminds us that literature is more than style. It is conscience. Critics may still argue over whether Tolstoy deserved the honor instead, yet Prudhomme's selection served another purpose. It showed that the Nobel Prize would not always follow fame. It could also lift voices that represented ideals Nobel himself had wished to uphold. In this way, Prudhomme's award was symbolic. His poetry reflected Alfred Nobel's desire to reward those who inspired humanity toward higher ideals, even if later generations judged differently. The choice spoke to the values of the Academy and the hopes of the new century. Over time, scholars have reconsidered his role. They see him not as the greatest poet of his age, but as a figure who embodied the serious, reflective spirit of literature. His calm voice contrasted with louder, more radical currents, offering balance during a turbulent era. Prudhomme's Nobel Prize remains a landmark. It reminds us that literature is not only about innovation but also about sustaining ideals, about offering readers a compass when the world feels uncertain. His poetry may whisper rather than shout, but his whisper is steady. Imagine him in his study, weakened by illness, yet still leaning over his desk, pen in hand. The words he shaped were quiet, thoughtful, and deeply sincere. That spirit became the foundation of the Nobel tradition in literature, where every laureate adds a new voice to the chorus of history. Though his fame dimmed with time, Sully Prudhomme remains a symbol of poetry's dignity. His Nobel Prize secured his place in history, reminding future generations that the written word holds power equal to invention or discovery. His verses still wait quietly for readers to return to them. The themes he cherished, justice, sorrow, endurance, are timeless. Readers who seek comfort in poetry can still find in his lines the voice of a man who searched for balance between reason and heart. His poems offer a steady rhythm, like the calm steps of a quiet walk. The Nobel Prize in Literature has since honored voices from many nations, reflecting diverse languages and traditions. Yet all of them share a link to Prudhomme. He was the first thread in the tapestry, a beginning that gave the prize shape and meaning. Some laureates wrote with fire, some with wit, and some with sorrow. Prudhomme wrote with reflection. His voice was not the loudest, but it carried sincerity. For a prize that values ideals, his award was a fitting foundation, a calm stone laid at the base of a grand monument. His poetry shows that literature does not always need to surprise. Sometimes it comforts, steadying the reader in uncertain times. Prudhomme gave his audience not fireworks, but candlelight, a gentle glow that illuminated rather than overwhelmed. In this way, his work remains suited to quiet nights. Read slowly, his verses ease the mind into contemplation. They invite rest rather than excitement, carrying the reader gently toward reflection. His Nobel Prize ensured that this quiet voice would not be forgotten. For the Academy, his award symbolized an aspiration that literature should strive not only for art, but also for conscience. His poems embodied the search for ideals, blending thought and feeling, reason and emotion, in a way that reflected the hopes of a new century. Imagine Prudhomme seated near a window, light falling on the pages of his notebook. Paris hums beyond the glass, yet in his study there is only silence and words. Each line he writes is careful, deliberate, like a stone placed in a path that others might follow. His Nobel Prize was the first light for literature within the Nobel tradition. Though later voices may have outshone him in fame, his award reminds us of the many forms literature may take. Even a quiet poet can stand at the front of history, honored for sincerity. And so we leave Sully Prudhomme here, the first Nobel laureate in literature, the poet of conscience. His story is a soft echo, reminding us that poetry can guide, steady, and comfort. In the stillness of night, his words linger like a calm breath, carrying ideals into dreams. Henry Dunant and Frédéric Passy, builders of peace. The Nobel Peace Prize was perhaps the most personal of Alfred Nobel's wishes. After a lifetime touched by weapons in conflict, Nobel desired that his fortune should honor not only discovery, but also peace. In 1901, the very first Peace Prize was awarded to two men of different paths. The laureates were Henry Dunant of Switzerland, founder of the Red Cross, and Frédéric Passy of France, a tireless advocate for arbitration and peace. One had witnessed the horrors of battle firsthand, while the other raised his voice in parliaments and assemblies. Together they symbolized action and advocacy. Henry Dunant was born in Geneva in 1828. Raised in a devout family, he was taught compassion from an early age. His parents encouraged service to others, and as a young man, he devoted time to charities, visiting prisons and helping the poor. This spirit of service defined his life. In 1859, Dunant traveled to northern Italy on business. He arrived near the town of Solferino just as one of the bloodiest battles of the century unfolded. 40,000 men lay dead or wounded in a single day, and the fields were filled with cries of pain and despair. Dunant was shaken. Abandoning his work, he gathered villagers to help the wounded, regardless of which side they fought for. He organized makeshift hospitals in churches, urging all to remember a simple principle: we are all brothers. This compassion became the seed of a movement. He later published his experiences in a book titled A Memory of Solferino. The vivid account described the suffering he had witnessed and called for an international agreement to protect wounded soldiers and those who cared for them. His words stirred leaders across Europe. Out of this call, the International Red Cross was born in 1863. Its mission was clear: to provide neutral aid to those wounded in battle. Soon after, the Geneva Convention was signed, establishing laws of war to protect the vulnerable. Dunant's vision had become reality. Though celebrated, Dunant's personal life grew difficult. Business failures left him bankrupt, and he lived in obscurity for years. Yet he never abandoned his ideals. He continued to speak and write, reminding the world of its responsibility to the suffering. His vision endured even when he struggled. By the end of the century, recognition returned to him. People remembered that it was Dunant who had planted the seeds of compassion that grew into the Red Cross. His presence as one of the first Peace Prize laureates honored both his vision and the millions. Touched by his work, Frédéric Passy, born in Paris in 1822, followed a different path. A respected economist and parliamentarian, he became convinced that war was wasteful and destructive, draining nations of wealth and spirit. He believed disputes could be settled through arbitration rather than bloodshed. Passy studied law and economics, but it was politics that gave him a platform. He entered the French Parliament during a time of tension and rivalry in Europe. While others debated armies and alliances, he spoke of dialogue, treaties, and the savings that peace could bring to nations. He founded the Ligue Internationale et Permanente de la Paix, the International League for Peace. In 1867, this group gathered voices across borders to call for arbitration in conflicts. Instead of meeting on battlefields, Passy argued nations should meet at tables, speaking before fighting. Passy believed peace was not only a moral duty but also an economic necessity. War consumed resources that could have built schools, hospitals, and homes. He reminded leaders that prosperity flowed from cooperation, not conquest, and that nations gained more through trade than through bloodshed. He was a gifted speaker. His voice carried both reason and compassion. Audiences described his lectures as calm but persuasive, filled with logic yet touched by sincerity. He sought to show that peace was not idealism alone, but a practical foundation for stability and progress. Passy worked tirelessly, writing essays, addressing assemblies, and lobbying leaders. Though often dismissed as too hopeful, he persisted, believing that even small steps toward dialogue were victories. His efforts inspired younger activists and gave the peace movement structure and credibility. While Dunant was remembered for action on the battlefield, Passy represented prevention. His work aimed to keep nations from reaching battlefields at all. Together, their stories formed a balance. One cared for the wounded, the other sought to stop the wounds from happening. In 1901, the Nobel Committee honored them both as the first Peace Prize laureates. Their lives were different, yet their goals converged in the vision of Alfred Nobel, who hoped his fortune would encourage a world where compassion and dialogue replaced violence and revenge. Dunant, living quietly in a Swiss nursing home, was deeply moved by the award. Forgotten for decades, he now felt his work recognized anew. He shared the honor humbly, saying the prize belonged not to him alone, but to the spirit of humanity that had built the Red Cross. Passy accepted the prize as recognition not only of his own efforts, but of the wider peace movement. He saw it as encouragement for future generations to continue the struggle for dialogue and arbitration. For him, the award was a light in a still troubled world. The joint award carried symbolism. By honoring both a man of compassion and a man of persuasion, the Nobel Committee showed that peace requires many paths. It is built through care for the suffering and through tireless calls for prevention. Both men together embodied this truth. After receiving the Nobel Prize, Dunant's final years were spent in quiet reflection. He lived modestly in the small Swiss town of Heiden, cared for in a nursing home. Visitors came to see him, inspired by his story. Though frail, his spirit remained strong, still speaking of compassion. He continued to receive letters of gratitude from families and Red Cross workers across the world. Many thanked him for saving lives he would never know. For Dunant, these words mattered more than medals. Each note was proof that kindness had grown into a lasting force. Passy, too, spent his later years devoted to the cause. He continued writing and speaking, even as his health declined. He never stopped urging leaders to choose dialogue over war. He knew peace was fragile, yet he believed that each effort kept hope alive for future generations. The Nobel Prize gave the peace movement legitimacy. Once dismissed as unrealistic, advocates for arbitration now pointed to the prize as proof that the world valued their efforts. Dunant and Passy stood as examples that voices for peace could be heard and honored. For Dunant, the prize restored dignity after years of hardship. Once bankrupt and forgotten, he ended his life recognized as a founder of compassion. His name once nearly erased, was now written into history alongside the Red Cross, a movement that would endure for centuries. For Passy, the prize was confirmation of a lifetime's work. He had fought with words rather than weapons, facing ridicule but never surrendering his ideals. The award was not only for him, but for every peace advocate who believed that nations could find better ways to settle disputes. Dunant died in 1910 at the age of 82. His final words reportedly expressed hope for the continuation of humanitarian work. He had seen his vision grow from one battlefield into a global institution. His legacy lived in every Red Cross volunteer tending the wounded. Passy passed away in 1912, 2 years later, though war still loomed on the horizon. His life stood as testimony that even in times of conflict, there were voices calling for reason. His writings and lectures remained as seeds for those who would continue the peace movement. The Joint Award of 1901 remains a symbol of balance. Dunant showed compassion in the face of violence, while Passy built frameworks to prevent it. Together, they embodied two halves of peace, the care of the present and the hope for the future. Their legacies intertwine with Nobel's vision. The Peace Prize would not only honor treaties or leaders, but also those who spoke for humanity. From their example, the prize grew into one of the most recognized symbols of moral courage in the modern world. After Dunant's death, the Red Cross grew into a worldwide movement. Volunteers carried his vision onto new battlefields, offering aid regardless of nationality. The Red Cross emblem, born from his dream at Solferino, became a universal symbol of mercy amid chaos. The Geneva Conventions expanded, creating stronger protections for civilians, prisoners of war, and medical staff. Each new agreement carried echoes of Dunant's call, that compassion must not stop at borders or uniforms, but extend to all who suffer in conflict. Passy's influence lived on in peace societies across Europe and beyond. His arguments for arbitration inspired the creation of the Hague Peace Conferences in the early 20th century, where nations gathered to seek non-violent solutions to disputes. His voice lingered in every treaty and negotiation. While wars still erupted, the seeds of peace work had been planted. Activists built upon Passy's foundations, believing that diplomacy and cooperation could prevent destruction. His speeches, once considered too idealistic, became guiding principles for international organizations in the years to come. The Nobel Peace Prize grew alongside their legacies. Each year, laureates honored in Oslo were linked to the first two recipients. Dunant and Passy had shown that peace could mean both direct humanitarian aid and persistent advocacy for dialogue. Both approaches remained vital. In times of war, the Red Cross provided care where no one else could. In times of fragile peace, voices of arbitration reminded leaders that diplomacy was possible. Together, these two paths became pillars of peace work, carrying their influence into the modern age. Later, Nobel laureates often invoked their names. Humanitarian workers praised Dunant as an inspiration for selfless service. Activists for disarmament and negotiation recalled Passy's courage in speaking against the tide of militarism. Their memory gave weight to the prize's meaning. Their stories also offered balance. Peace is not achieved through one effort alone. It is built both in the field, where lives are saved in the midst of conflict, and in the halls of power, where leaders must be persuaded to seek alternatives to war. The Peace Prize thus honors a spectrum of efforts, from relief organizations to diplomats, from activists to visionaries. That breadth began with Dunant and Passy, two men whose lives demonstrated that peace requires both compassion and persistence. Their shared award in 1901 carried more than symbolism. It created a model for the prize itself, one that continues to this day. Each laureate since has walked in their footsteps, guided by the light of service and the strength of conscience. The Red Cross that Dunant inspired now spans the globe, answering disasters, wars, and crises. Its volunteers carry his spirit into refugee camps, hospitals, and battlefields. Each act of mercy continues the promise he made at Solferino, that compassion belongs to all. Passy's vision of arbitration found new life in international organizations, the League of Nations and later the United Nations, built upon the principles he championed. His belief that dialogue could replace weapons shaped the framework of modern diplomacy. Though both men lived in a century often marked by conflict, their voices carried a different message. They reminded the world that even in the darkest hours, individuals could plant seeds of humanity and reason. Those seeds grew into movements larger than themselves. Dunant's image is often remembered as the man in Solferino's fields, bending to bind the wounds of soldiers. Passy is pictured at the podium, speaking calmly yet firmly for peace. Together, their lives offer a contrast, one of action and one of persuasion, both essential to peace. The Nobel Peace Prize has since honored presidents, activists, organizations, and ordinary citizens who stood against violence. Each carries a thread that connects back to 1901, to the first laureates who showed that peace is both care for the present and hope for the future. Their legacies remind us that peace is never complete. It must be built again and again with hands that heal and voices that persuade. The Red Cross continues to work, and peace advocates continue to speak, keeping alive the spirit that Dunant and Passy carried. Imagine Dunant in his quiet nursing home, reflecting on Solferino. Imagine Passy writing essays late at night, urging nations to choose reason. Their lives, though far apart, converged in a single prize, binding two visions into one shared honor. Their award reminds us that peace is not abstract. It is found in a bandage tied on a battlefield, in a treaty signed at a table, in the choice to see others as human rather than enemy. These small acts build the foundation of harmony. The Peace Prize remains a lantern in uncertain times. Each year it honors those who continue the work begun by Dunant and Passy, ensuring their voices are not forgotten. Their legacy is not only memory, but living action carried forward. And so we leave Henry Dunant and Frédéric Passy here, the first Nobel Peace Prize laureates. One gave mercy to the wounded, the other gave arguments for peace. Together, they remind us that even in a world of conflict, humanity can choose compassion, dialogue, and hope. And so the first Nobel Prizes were awarded, each a light placed upon the path of humanity. A physicist who revealed invisible rays, a chemist who gave shape to molecules, a doctor who restored children's breath, a poet who lent voice to conscience, and to men who carried the banner of peace. Together they formed a circle of discovery, healing, imagination, and compassion. Their lives were different, yet they shared a common thread, the wish to serve humanity. Alfred Nobel's fortune, born of invention, became a gift that honored not only knowledge, but also kindness and hope. Each laureate showed us a different way to improve the world. Through science, through medicine, through words, and through peace. Their examples remind us that progress comes not only from brilliance, but also from humility, patience, and courage in the face of doubt. The Nobel Prizes continue each year, carrying forward the tradition these first voices began. Each medal awarded is a reminder that human effort, when guided by compassion, can leave behind light that endures far beyond a single lifetime. As you drift into rest, let these stories settle gently in your thoughts. May the quiet persistence of Röntgen, the imagination of Van t Hoff, the compassion of Behring, the reflection of Prudhomme, and the hope of Dunant and Passy guide your dreams. Good night, dear listener. May your sleep be peaceful, your dreams kind, and may you awaken renewed, carrying with you the calm reminder that even in silence, the world is filled with quiet lights waiting to be discovered.